For this one, I want you to go to the scoring guide on our team drive for part A, the explanation of what graph this is. What I really want to walk through is B, C, and D. Super complicated how we get to the final answer in part D. So for part C, it says find dx d theta, and specifically when theta equals pi over 6. So we have to use our polar conversion of x being r cosine theta, because it's asking for dx d theta. So we need an equation that has both x and theta in it to make this happen. So we currently only have r and theta. So we have to be able to make this into something that has x and theta. And if x equals r cosine theta and r is sine 5 theta, that's just going to go right here. So that means that x is equal to sine 5 theta times cosine theta. All right, so now we need to find the derivative of this thing, dx d theta. And we notice that this is sine 5 theta times cosine theta. So that means that this is going to be a product rule of derivatives. So we're first going to find the derivative of the first function, which is cosine of 5 theta. And then this is a chain rule, because we have a 5 theta inside sine. We have to multiply by the derivative of that, which is 5. So we get 5 cosine 5 theta times cosine theta, plus the first function, sine 5 theta, times the derivative of the second function, which is actually negative sine theta. So that's going to turn this positive to a negative, and then we'll put the sine theta here. So now what we need to do is find this at pi over 6. So we plug in pi over 6 for theta. So that gives us 5 cosine of 5 pi over 6 times cosine of pi over 6 minus sine of 5 pi over 6 times sine of pi over 6. Okay, so cosine 5 pi over 6, that's negative root 3 over 2. So this is going to be negative 5 root 3 over 2 times cosine of pi over 6 is positive root 3 over 2. So now we have root 3 times root 3 is just going to become 3. And we have 5 on top, so that's 5 times 3 is negative 15. And then 2 times 2 is 4. So we get negative 15 over 4 on this side. Okay. And then over here, we have sine of 5 pi over 6, which is just going to be 1/2. And then sine of pi over 6 is also 1/2. So we have 1/2 times 1/2, which simplifies to 1/4. Okay. So what we end up with then is negative 15/4 minus 1/4, right? So we have negative 15/4 minus 1/4, which simplifies to negative 16/4, which is just negative 4. And that is dx d theta at theta equals pi over 6. So now we need to do the same process for y and find dy d theta. So that's next. So if r equals sine 5 theta and y equals r times sine theta, then y equals sine 5 theta times sine theta. We just replace r with how r is defined. So again, to do dy d theta here, we have to do a product rule for derivatives. So the derivative of sine 5 theta is again 5 cosine 5 theta multiplied by the derivative, or by the second function, plus the first function, sine 5 theta, multiplied by the derivative of the second function, which is cosine theta. So now we're going to plug in pi over 6, so we get 5 cosine of 5 pi over 6 times sine of pi over 6 plus sine of 5 pi over 6 times cosine of pi over 6. Okay, so cosine 5 pi over 6 is again negative root 3 over 2. So this part is going to be negative 5 root 3 over 2, negative 5 root 3 over 2, times sine of pi over 6 is 1/2. Okay, over here we have sine of 5 pi over 6, which is 1/2. And cosine of pi over 6 is positive root 3 over 2. So negative 5 root 3 over 2 times 1/2 is going to simplify as negative 5 root 3 over 4. And 1/2 times root 3 over 2 is going to be root 3 over 4. So we have 5 root 3 over 4 plus root 3 over 4. Okay. Or rather, this is still negative. So negative 5 root 3 over 4 plus root 3 over 4. So what's that going to be? I'm going to go over here and do this. Okay. Negative 5 root 3 over 4 plus root 3 over 4 is going to be negative 4 root 3 over 4, which is just negative root 3. Okay. So again, that came from first doing the product rule for derivatives, then plugging in pi over 6, and then using our trig knowledge to simplify this down. Okay. So we end up with our dx d theta, or dy d theta at pi over 6 is root 3. Okay. So now we have dx d theta is negative 4. dy d theta is negative root 3. And dy dx is just going to be dy d theta divided by dx d theta. So when it asks for the slope of the curve at theta equals pi over 6, well, that is dy dx. So all we're going to do is take our answers from part B and C and divide them. So dy d theta ended up being negative root 3. And then dx d theta ended up being, was it negative or positive 4? Negative 4. Okay. So that is going to cancel and give us just positive root 3 over 4. And that is the slope of our rose curve at theta equals pi over 6.